staying when no one is waiting, staying when no one expects you to succeed. That kind of persistence creates depth, and depth is what allows you to handle success when it finally arrives. Because success without depth collapses under its own weight. It turns into pressure, anxiety, fear of being exposed. But success built on years of unseen effort feels natural. It feels earned. It feels like a continuation rather than a shock. And this is why the period where nobody believed in you was actually training you for longevity. It was teaching you how to carry responsibility, how to self-regulate, how to trust your judgment without constant feedback. And that trust is critical. Because when you eventually reach a point where people do start believing in you, their belief will come with noise, opinions, expectations, and agendas. And without a strong internal compass, that noise can pull you off course. But you are building that compass now, in the quiet, through repetition, through reflection, through failure that teaches instead of humiliates. And you are learning something else too, something even more important. The belief from others is often reactive. It shows up after proof, after validation, after safety is established. But belief in yourself has to be proactive. It has to exist before evidence, before reassurance, before comfort. And you practiced that kind of belief every time you continued without encouragement, every time you invested energy without guarantee, every time you chose growth over approval. And that practice rewired you. It changed how you relate to fear. Because fear thrives on uncertainty, but you learned how to move with uncertainty instead of waiting for it to disappear. You learned how to act without complete confidence, how to take steps while still questioning yourself. And that is real courage, not the absence of doubt, but the refusal to let doubt make decisions for you. And as this courage grew, so did your independence. You stopped measuring progress by external milestones and started measuring it by internal consistency, by whether you kept promises to yourself, by whether you improved even slightly from yesterday. And those small improvements compounded quietly, like interest in an account no one else could see. And one day, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but inevitably, that account will be noticed. Because consistency leaves evidence, and when that evidence becomes visible, people will say they always knew you had it in you. They will rewrite history to include themselves in your journey. But you will remember the nights when belief was absent, the mornings when motivation had to be manufactured, the moments when quitting would have been easier and socially acceptable. And instead of feeling angry about being doubted, you will feel grateful for what that doubt forced you to become, because it gave you a relationship with yourself that does not depend on applause. And that relationship is unbreakable. And as you stand in this phase right now, still moving forward without universal belief, understand that you are not behind. You are not missing something. You are not failing to be seen. You are building something that does not require permission, something that cannot be taken away by shifting opinions. And this is the power of being underestimated. It gives you space to grow without interference, to experiment without scrutiny, to fail without spectacle. And in that space, you are becoming more than what anyone else imagined for you, including yourself. And the road ahead will still challenge you. It will still test your patience and resilience. But you are no longer walking it as someone seeking validation. You are walking it as someone grounded in purpose. And purpose does not rush. It does not panic. It does not compare. It moves steadily, knowing that timing is not a measure of worth. And every step you take now, unseen and is reinforcing a future that will stand on its own. Not because people finally believed in you, but because you never stopped believing in yourself when it mattered most. There comes a moment, often unnoticed, where the weight of other people's disbelief no longer presses on your chest the way it used to, where it still exists, but it no longer defines your breathing. And that moment is not marked by applause or recognition. It is marked by indifference, by the quiet realization that you are no longer living to be understood. And that shift is profound, because once you stop seeking permission to be who you are becoming, you begin to operate with a kind of freedom that most people never taste. A freedom born not from confidence alone, but from survival, from having walked long enough without reassurance that you learned how to trust your own footsteps. And trust changes everything. It changes how you approach risk, how you interpret failure, how you respond to silence. Because silence no longer feels like rejection. It feels like space. Space to think, to refine, to deepen. And in that space, you begin to see patterns you missed before. You see how often people's disbelief was actually projection, how their warnings were confessions, how their doubts revealed the limits they accepted for themselves, not the limits of what was possible for you. And this understanding does not make you angry, it makes you compassionate, because you realize how many people are trapped by the need to be validated before they move. How many dreams die not because they were impossible, but because they were inconvenient, uncomfortable, or misunderstood at the wrong time. And you start to recognize how rare it is to continue without applause, how uncommon it is to keep choosing effort over comfort. And instead of feeling small for being doubted, you begin to feel quietly proud for enduring it, because endurance reshapes identity. It turns you from someone who hopes into someone who builds, and builders see the world differently. They do not ask if something is likely, they ask if it is worth the work. And worth is a question only you can answer. Not your friends, not your family, not your critics, because they are not the ones who have to live inside your regret if you quit. And regret is heavier than effort. It lingers longer, it speaks louder over time, and you sensed that early, even if you could not articulate it. You knew the stopping would cost you more than continuing, and that intuition guided you through uncertainty, through moments where progress felt invisible, where motivation felt borrowed, where discipline was the only thing holding the structure together. And discipline is misunderstood. People think it is about control, but for you, it became about care. About showing up for the future version of yourself who is counting on you to not give up now. And this care made you patient. Patient with slow growth, patient with mistakes, patient with the fact that mastery takes longer than hype. And while others chased quick validation, you invested in depth, in skill, in understanding. And depth compounds in ways that are not immediately obvious. It changes how you solve problems, how you adapt to challenges, how you remain calm under pressure. And these qualities do not trend. They do not go viral, but they endure. And endurance is what separates people who have a moment from people who have a legacy. And you are building the kind of foundation that can carry weight, because you have already carried disappointment. You have already carried loneliness. You have already carried doubt. And if you can carry those things without breaking, success will not crush you either. And this is the hidden advantage of being underestimated. It forces you to grow strong in areas that are invisible to the eye. It builds emotional muscle, mental clarity, and a tolerance for discomfort that becomes invaluable later. Because the higher you go, the more pressure you face. And pressure exposes weaknesses that applause can hide. But you have already been exposed to pressure in private. You have already learned how to function without external energy. And that makes you self-sustaining, and self-sustaining people are dangerous in the best way. Because they cannot be easily discouraged, manipulated, or distracted. They do not rely on constant affirmation to stay aligned with their goals. And this alignment gives you momentum that feels calm, not frantic, focused, not desperate. And others may misinterpret this calm as lack of ambition. But it is actually the opposite. It is ambition that has learned patience. Ambition that does not need to announce itself. And as you move forward, you will notice something else changing. The way people interact with you, subtly at first, then more clearly. They begin to ask questions instead of giving advice. They listen more than they speak. And this shift can be disorienting, because it contrasts sharply with how you were once dismissed. But instead of craving this new attention, you observe it with distance, because you know how quickly belief can appear once risk is reduced. And you are no longer motivated by being believed in. You are motivated by being aligned with your purpose, and purpose does not fluctuate with opinions. It remains steady even when recognition increases, and this steadiness protects you from ego traps, from over-identification with outcomes, from the fear of losing status, because you remember who you were when status did not exist. You remember how you learned to create value without visibility, and that memory keeps you grounded. And as your journey continues, you will still face moments of doubt, moments where the road narrows and clarity feels distant. But now doubt is no longer an enemy. It is a signal to slow down, to reassess, to refine, not to retreat. And this relationship with doubt is powerful, because it turns what once paralyzed you into a tool for growth. And all of this, every layer of resilience, every ounce of self-trust, every quiet improvement, was born from the same source, the absence of belief from others. And what once felt like abandonment now feels like initiation, like a rite you had to pass through to become who you are becoming. And the irony is that if people had believed in you earlier, they might have softened your edges, they might have distracted you with comfort. They might have shaped your path in ways that were not truly yours. But because they did not, you learned how to stand alone. And standing alone teaches you how to stand anywhere. And that is a kind of power that does not fade, because it is not tied to circumstances. It is rooted in identity. An identity built through adversity is not easily shaken. And as you look ahead, you do not feel the urgency to prove anything. You feel the responsibility to continue, to honor the work already done, the sacrifices already made. The version of you who kept going when belief was absent, because that version deserves to see what all this effort becomes. And that commitment, quiet and unwavering, is what will carry you into the next chapter, not as someone seeking validation, but as someone who has already earned their own respect. Make sure you like the video and hit the subscribe button so we can motivate you more. And we look forward to hear your story in the comments. See you in the next one.